narrative does not provide solace, because now these people will blame themselves instead of consequences that are external. For example, if they say that hardship is the prerequisite for success, when they are facing this hardship, they will basically say, oh, this is my own fault because this is normal. Everyone goes through this, instead of looking for external factors that pressure them into this position. But third, on the idea of happiness, why is this very problematic? Because they cannot leave the toxic environments. They're seen as weak. They're seen as cowardly. They are seen as problematic if they try to opt out, because this is something that people say that everyone goes through, even though everyone is suffering and all the more less happy for it. There is societal backlash on this, even though it's actually very, very problematic. A good example of this is this. It's like if you pull all-nighters to practice debating in order to reach grand champions of a competition, that's seen as good, because you're basically torturing yourself and you're basically like trying to do something great with your life. But it's also seen as bad because you're actually torturing yourself and you're not actually gaining happiness out of it. So people are forced by the society, peer pressure, what have you, to actually continue, and prevention from leaving toxic behaviors, environments, because it's seen as weak or cowardly. And somehow staying up all night to prepare for a competition and not sleeping at all is seen as strong, brave, and good by society. This is really bad because everyone is less happy overall. But then opposition might talk about the idea of, oh, but then under our side, we have self-actualization. We say that self-actualization is a point that we win under our side. And that's my second argument about self-actualization. See, what is self-actualization? It talks hardship. Whether hardship is a prerequisite of self-actualization. Opening government posits to you that hardship is not a prerequisite of self-actualization, because we say that hardship is a world of needless suffering. We prefer a world of specialization, where people do not enter into anything that's hard for them, where people just now do anything that's specialized for them. If you are born smart at maths, go do maths. If you're born smart at English, go do English. Basically, do something that you're talented at from birth. Basically, do something that you were specialized in because you have talent from birth, genetics, what have you, to actually focus yourself on there. You don't need to do it. If you choose to do it because of your own free will, that's perfectly legitimate. But we're talking about, we don't want a world where people are pressured into doing this to uptake more suffering just because of societal pressure, because it creates an inefficient world. A world of specialization is a far more efficient world, and that's the world we fight for. Before I talk about my last point, I'll take any POIs from the floor. I really hope someone engages. No engagement? Okay, I'll move on. The idea that I want to bring before my closing speech is the idea of the narrative of coping mechanism. People are going to say, oh, this narrative is perfectly legitimate because it only functions as a coping mechanism. When people are failing in life, they can tell themselves, it's okay, everyone gets through this, and they can move on with their lives and they can do great things. We say this is bad. Why? Because it ignores the fact that some people have talent and privilege. No matter how hard I work in my life, I'm never going to be as successful as Bill Gates. I'm never going to be a billionaire because I'm not born as a white person. I'm not born from a background of riches and money. I don't have that talent. So this causes this narrative that basically poor people and people who are not talented, people who are in underprivileged circumstances, they think and they believe, because of this narrative, that hard work and hardship and all of this process can make them into anything they want, which is a lie. Because the fact is, we do not live in an egalitarian society. We do not live in an equal society, but this narrative feeds that perspective, feeds that false equality into people when we're actually living in a very systemically unequal world. So it basically tricks people into thinking they can achieve things that they cannot. That is why it doesn't function as a coping mechanism. For all these reasons, we are very, very proud to propose the fact that we regret this narrative. Thank you very much.
Cool. We thank the speaker for that speech. Next, we call upon Leader of Opposition. First.
Check, am I audible?
You're audible.
Wait. Okay. I'm gonna start Speech in 2, 3.
Government is that they never tell you about how powerful is this narrative in the current status quo, to the point that people will suddenly be irrational enough to keep toxicating themselves by involving themselves in a toxic environment, for example, right? I think that this is something that should not only be the scenario that OG can run at the end of the day. If in my point, I'm going to tell you that there are in any scenario, for example, even when we are in our comfort zone, for example, where we face our difficulties and face our hardships, ladies and gentlemen, I think that this particular narrative saying that it makes you stronger at the end of the day is not something that we should regret at the end of the day. This is the reason why we are opposed to regret this motion, right? Because of that point, I'm going to bring you two major points of rebuttals. Number one, OG tell you on how, for example, people will stay into the toxic zone to actually self-actualize themselves, ladies and gentlemen. So number one, you need to understand that saying narrative makes a person stronger does not mean that we are supporting individuals to self-harm themselves, ladies and gentlemen. We do not support, for example, individuals who continue toxicating themselves at the end of the day. But under our side of the house, for example, when you are trying your best, but you are not success at the end of the day, at the very least, behind this story, you have the moral message behind the hardship itself. Like even if, for example, ladies and gentlemen, you are not achieving your goal at the end of the day, at the very least, in the very bare minimum, you can improve yourself as a better individual. You will be able to be a better person to counter the same problem in the future at the end of the day. I think that this is very important. Why is that so? Because it sends the narrative towards this individual that the efforts and investment that they are pouring in order to achieve their goal is not wasted, ladies and gentlemen, right? I think this is the most important message that we need to impose to an individual, right? But second of all, let's talking about the idea of self-actualization at the end of the day, right? I think you do not have to get out your comfort zone, for example, to self-actualize yourself, ladies and gentlemen, because self-actualization is very arbitrary towards one individual to another individual. So if OG, for example, tell you that they regret the narrative because this narrative is the very matrix that individuals use to self-actualize themselves, we say that it's not true at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. Everyone, for example, have their own parameter and matrix to feel satisfied and self-actualize themselves, ladies and gentlemen, right? Like, for example, even if when I, for example, do not win a certain competition, ladies and gentlemen, I think that I have felt like I self-actualize myself. It is simply because the matrix, the arbitrary matrix and parameter that I have set for my own self, ladies and gentlemen, because I cannot, for example, from me, an individual who coming from small institution, for example, cannot necessarily set the parameter to win world championship just because suddenly, right? I think that the target to self-actualize yourself is very arbitrary, right? And not as high as what OG mentioned to you at the end of the day. So this is the reason why you can actually self-actualize without getting out your comfort zone at the end of the day, right? This is the reason why we do not regret the narrative that makes a person stronger, simply because we have our own decision. We have our rationality, for example, to set what is best for us, right? Individual is not suddenly being consumed by this especially when OG does not tell you to the point that people will be irrational in a toxic relationship, for example, right? Thinking about how the narrative allows individual to better accommodate the problems that they have in the future, right? So you need to understand what type of individual face hardships in the current status quo. I think that all layers of society, for example, the poor who struggle for their daily survival, for example.
LO, please stop your speech. Your connection is sort of breaking. So,
The rich who got bankruptcy, or the ladies and gentlemen type of people, ladies and gentlemen. Wait.
LO?
Yeah.
LO? Hello?
Halo, cek.
Ya. Diulang aja second contribution timer. Soalnya tadi second...
Wait.
Wait.
Okay. Gue ambil kertas. Wait. I'm gonna look for my paper.
Oh iya, nggak apa-apa. Ditunggu. Is there any way for you to improve
tadi
your
kata
connection?
terakhir yang
Tadi pas banget lagi pindah dari first contribution yang ke yang kedua. Bukan apa ya, yang the narrative allows people to accommodate something and then the rest is lost for me.
Okay. So am I better right now?
Yes.
Is it better? Okay.
Yes.
Jadi 3 menit lagi ya.
3 menit 20 ya.
Okay. So second, right, on how this narrative, for example, allow individuals to better accommodate the problems that they have, ladies and gentlemen. You need to understand what type of individuals that face hardship in the current status quo. I think that all layers of society, the poor who struggle for their daily survival, or even the rich who got bankruptcy, where their businesses get fraud and so on and so forth, are those type of people, ladies and gentlemen, who face the hardship of the day, right? So how this narrative plays in the society? I think that this narrative plays where many people, for example, justify that sometimes it's okay to face hardships because it makes you stronger at the end of the day. But why is this narrative important, ladies and gentlemen? Because vulnerable individuals who are frequently exposed with hardships are discouraged, as they are not able to see what is the moral behind their hardship that the universe gave to them, that they do not see any benefit by the hardship that they received from the universe, ladies and gentlemen. These individuals who might not see anything behind their hardship, at least can go on under our side of the house because they felt like regardless whether they achieve their goal or not, they will become a stronger person. And then this is a bare minimum benefit that these individuals can get, ladies and gentlemen. We have this narrative that, for example, pushes us to deal with this type of hardships, right? Comparatively under OG, when you regret the narrative, people cannot see the moral message behind the hardships, right? So when people, for example, fails, they suddenly stop just like that, ladies and gentlemen, because they do not see any kind of benefits or pragmatic advantage that they can get as an individual, ladies and gentlemen. People will think that their effort that they have been pouring doesn't give him or her anything because they have been failing since the very first beginning, ladies and gentlemen. I think this narrative will self-devalue themselves because their investment, such as time, such as their efforts that they have been using, resulted into something that they, for example, cannot achieve, right? Because here's the thing, not everyone has the privilege to have the access to achieve their goal, right? Sometimes there are barriers, for example. Sometimes there are barriers where you are not allowed, for example, to get married to your particular partner at the partner, for example, at the end of the day, right? But under our side of the house, ladies and gentlemen, I think that we will be able to see the moral and also the positive side of the stories of why, for example, these hardships are coming to me and so on and so forth. Therefore, when we are trying, for example, to cope up with the same type of problems in the future, ladies and gentlemen, we will not be discouraged. At the end of the day, we believe that we have better capacity in solving this type of issue. So whenever I face the exact same problems, I will not be discouraged discouraged to begin with, right? Under OG, when they told you these hardships does not make you any improvement, whenever you face any kind of problems, you are going to be demotivated because you think that you have the exact same capacity to solve problem, and this is something that we do not want. We are very proud to oppose.
Cool. Thank you very much. I'm not muted. Okay. Next, we call upon the Deputy Prime Minister. The floor is yours.
Am I audible?
Kurang loud.
Test. Is it better now?
Yes.
I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, we believe that opposition bench accuses us of only playing in one narrative while they themselves do the same thing. Because throughout the speech, we can see that he never touched our scenario in where this narrative can be the incentive for people to torture themselves. But firstly, engaging to their case, they stated their main points are basically they are saying that hardship is part of our daily life, and that's why it's not that extreme. And secondly, that it will serve as a good coping mechanism in the face of failure. So now let's engage in their scenario. Firstly, we believe that even if hardship is part of our daily life, it will still be better for us not to use this narrative, because this narrative will create illusion for people that they can take on a lot of they have to suffer in order for them to go stronger. Why is this harmful? Because then the strength of a person or an individual will be measured by how many hardship that person have faced, even though that is actually not the case. Even if you have been living your life in an easy way, for example, it doesn't mean that you are not strong. It doesn't mean that you are less than other person whose life might be harder than you. So we believe that this narrative is false. This narrative will create illusion for people. And also, second point, they stated that it will be a good coping mechanism in the face of failure, because then at least you will have some consolation and you will be better if you face the same problem in the future. We believe that this is not the case. Why? Because our world and our lives are very dynamic. There is no same problem, exact same problem. Even if the problem might be similar, the people or the situation will be different. And that's why it's useless for us to look for hardship or to justify pursuing hardship, because we think that it will make us stronger, because in the future the problem will be different and it will require different approach from people, so it won't make us stronger. But even if the problem will be the same, it doesn't mean that we will solve it easier, because we will still feel the same emotion, the same feeling, the same bad things, so that it will still be hard for us. But compared to our side, if we don't have this narrative, from the very first time, people will not set themselves for disappointment, for failure. When they fail, they will feel that it is okay. So they won't need any coping mechanism whatsoever, because we will, our focus will be on happiness, not only advancement. So the failure in our world will be when you are not able to pursue what you like, when you are not being able to have to do your passion, for example. So it is not advancement like what will happen in their world. And also, why do we believe that this narrative can be harmful? Because it will limit people from doing better in their life. Why? Because this narrative erases the concept of privilege. Because this narrative then will tell people that the only way to be successful or to be strong is through working hard or through hardship. Even case, privilege exists and people should be educated to understand that, so that they don't suffer needlessly. Because no matter how hard you work, if you are not the 1% of the population, for example, you won't be that rich in the future. So it will be better for us to focus on what we do best and focus on what we like, in order for us to be happy at the end of the day. And also, this narrative will belittle people who don't want to pursue advancement, for example. It also will increase the concept of seniority. For example, your parents told you that you don't know anything because you have never experienced any problem in your life, or you cannot decide for yourself because you haven't been through what they have been through. So it will be harmful because it will divide society into classes where the people who pursue advancement will be seen as strong and wise, while the people who choose to pursue what they like, who choose to find happiness in simple things, will be seen as weak and will be seen as illegitimate. Their voices won't count, their voices won't be heard. So we believe that not only does this narrative create illusion, it also brings harm because it belittles people and it stigmatizes people as weak when all they do is looking for happiness. So what do we want? What world do we want out of this? Our proposal. We believe that in a world where there is no narrative like this, happiness will be easier to reach because people will not feel the need to be great things. For example, winning WUDC, for example, by winning small championship or even by practicing with their friends, they will feel like it is happiness, it is enough. And also, it will also create a better world because people will have the incentive to grow from themselves, not from the pressure from society or from the pressure of being stronger or from the pressure of suffering. When people grow, they will have the incentive from themselves and it will be better because the change or the happiness will be more organic and will be easier to reach. So we believe that incentive to grow or to change will still be there, but it will be better because it will be outside of societal pressure. Lastly, we believe that even if we experience hardship or failure, it will still be better under our side because we will see that we will not beat ourselves over it. We know that we are not the problem, but probably the system or our condition is less good than other people. And we can focus on accepting that and make peace with it and focus on what can we do to make us happy instead of suffering needlessly. Very proud to oppose.
We thank the speaker for that speech. Next, we call upon the LO.
Am I audible? Sorry,
Yes,
am I audible?
you are audible.
Okay. Wait. Okay. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. First thing first, just because this narrative exists, just because we feel that hardship is something that is important, it doesn't mean that people will become so irrational to the point that they do not try to solve their own problems, that they don't try to stop their own hardships, that they completely give up and do nothing. We think that the idea of what hardship is and how we fight it is that we're trying to always to solve it, right? That we're trying to solve it in the end of the day, that we'll try to go over it in the end of the day. The comparison is, in our case, you have believed that this hardship could make you stronger or had make you stronger to the point that you could actually go through it. You could actually get away from that problem because you feel that way. It's a placebo idea of actually trying to better yourself. Comparison in their case, they'll simply go back to their room, play games because that's going to make them happy and not solve their problems or their hardships. It's a decision that this narrative to go away means the people would just run away from their problems. People would instead opt in to a more easier life where people are going to have happier conditions, despite the fact that it is, not really beneficial to their own personal growth. I think before going to anything, I need to clarify, or at the very least, rebut on the idea of what is they trying to say, because the entirety of the OG case only could fly if the narrative is hardships makes you successful. It's not. The narrative is that hardship makes you stronger. Doesn't mean that you have to be successful to be able to be, stronger. We're talking about people who goes through life knowing, just like what, OO kind of said, life is hard. Life is full of different type of arbitrary, extension basically. It starts randomly. You live with random stats. You have different talents. You have different capacity. It's basically pure chaos. You cannot decide anything at all at life. You cannot decide who your dad is. You cannot decide what your talent is. You have nothing. You have no control. In their best scenario, talented in math, able to debate, let's say, blah, 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 they still have no capacity to stop themselves to feel empty, because we have to admit, in life, even if you feel like you're the best, there is still people who are going to be better than you in debate. There's going to be people who are better than you in math. I spent 9 years in debate. I feel Randy is still better than me every single debate. That shows that how much you're trying to push yourself will not necessarily. The idea is that this hardship should not be, the narrative is not hardship will, endow success in the end of the day. Instead, it feels like the narrative is hardship will make you stronger, right? It means that in our case, at the very least, when I see that my junior is much better than me, at the very least, I can feel like I try to help him. I can feel like there is happiness, that I also have a certain amount of personal growth. That this idea of the narrative, they seem to completely misunderstood, is personal growth. We're trying to make people better because we're championing the personal growth of these people. At least in our case, to say that it will not cause any type of what did he say, coping mechanism, is a lie. Because at the very least, people would feel like they have actually, better themselves. They've actually progressed in their life to the point that they have certain amount of capacity to actually feel better and actually find happiness in that capacity to actually feel good, right? In their case, when you are talented in, let's say, math, and then you realize someone is actually better than you completely, you have no alternative to feel comfortable. You have no alternative to feel happy, because you realize, well, if someone is better than me in math, despite that is the only thing I have, then might as well just play games and be happy. Because that's basically that they're trying to say, that they're not solving their own problems, they're not solving anything, they're simply just going to give up in their own lives. And I think that that's something that we do not want in these people. Because like Randy said, we need to understand that these people who are trying to go through hardship are not just people who are, privileged, who people who have the capacity to stay low and do nothing. These people are most likely people who are poor, people who has to go through real hardship of actually not having money, for example, or not actually being able to continue their education, not being able to have jobs. These people, in the end of the day, will try to do their best, their absolute worst, for example, choosing the worst jobs in order for them to be able to try and better themselves. Why? Because the narrative exists in the first place. Because this narrative actually showed them, at the very least, if you're not successful, you're better than you are yesterday. You're better than you are 5 years ago. You're better than you are 7 years ago. It's those type of idea that is not necessarily toxic at all. Right? It's very comforting for people who has nothing in addition. In their case, only those with talent, only those with the capacity to actually self-actualize themselves completely will be happy. Other than that, they'll just think that they have fun debating, but really just not really happy because they realize, there are VMs out there, there are, Adams out there, there are people who are much better than them. We think that shows that the condition that they're trying to face will never be able to be self-actualized anyway. And we're not saying that the condition in our case will not be happening. Instead, the self-actualization we see is more arbitrary, more limited on the idea of what people tries to be. I think what I'm trying to say here is that this narrative champions what life is supposed to be about. Actually going through all the hard things, actually going through education, for example, suffering everything, blah, blah, blah. But really, in the end of the day, it is to better yourself. It's actually to make yourself to have some certain amount of self-worth. I think that that's something that is missing in this completion. We think that that's something okay. Before that, yes, please.
Okay. Why do people need to go through that suffering to be the ultimate goal in life? We say that the ultimate goal in life should be happiness. Why is that a problem?
See, like that's the thing. We're not saying that this type of hardship will necessarily be all self-actualized completely to the end level. You're not all going to be world champions. Let's be honest with that. But what you are going to be is better than you are before. And I think that's something that not all people could relate to. Even if you do not have a beautiful girlfriend, for example, but the fact that you have someone to take care of you, or someone that actually can, you have a good friend and something like that, that could also be a self-actualization, because you're trying to get out there, you're trying to be more sociable comparative to you are 10 years ago when you play games alone. This is my actual story. Point is that these people, for example, would have more capacity to feel better for themselves. This is something that completely will go away if we completely regret this idea. We don't think that that's something we should regret. This gives people hope. And I think that that's something we genuinely need to have, right? Something that actually creates a growth for everyone, no matter how much money you have or none you have. We think that that is the idea that we're trying to champion. Randy has given to you the explanation of why this is great, and also explained to you on why this, in the end of the day, should be the weapon that we use to go against life. It's just how we're supposed to be, and we are happy to live this life in this hardship comparative to simply, play games and do nothing. That's why we're proud to. Is it propose or oppose? Thank you.
Testing. Am I audible? Testing. Hello.
You're audible.
Okay. Wait, let me set my timer. I think the biggest problem with opening debate is they both only operate in extremes, where the opening governments say, oh, you don't need this narrative because if you do, people are going to work themselves to the bone until they're walking zombies. And opening opposition says, oh, this is the only prerequisite for you to be successful in life. And if you're not going to be successful, at least you're going to be happy with whatever you earn at the end of the day. I believe that this is very problematic. And I'm going to try to clear up this debate and also rebut OO's major point talking about happiness and why it's unachievable, exactly because you have this illusion of strength at the end of the day. But before that, several clarifications towards the case of government side of the house as a whole. First of all, we don't believe the characterization of opening government is relevant, because realistically, people won't tell you to do things that you don't like just because it's hard. People won't tell you to stop doing things just because it's easy. People will still be pushed to do the things that they're good at on both sides of the house, and people aren't that stupid as to self-harm just because of this narrative. Opening government also fails to tell you the comparison of what the world was going to look like in government side of the house, so I, as the member of government, will be the one to take these burdens. Number one, I believe that the narrative of hardship is misdefined by opening government, and we believe that the correct characterization is telling people that, oh, if you split your time into doing part-time jobs while being in college, you're going to be stronger than your counterpart that only go through college because they're getting paid for by their parents. If you spend your time constantly grinding for you're going to be better than your counterparts that do nothing but laze all day. We don't believe that this is true, because then the narrative of strength will become superficial and illusionistic on the side of the house. So what we want on government side of the house is that we want to support a narrative that comfort is good. You don't have to push yourself to the point of hardship in order to achieve things, and it's better for you to work smarter, not harder. And we believe that it's wrong for you to blame someone for their shortcomings simply because they don't work hard enough. So two things that I'm going to do in my speech. First of all, I'm going to tell you about why strength in this kind of narrative is actually superficial and unimportant and doesn't mean anything. Second of all, I'm going to talk about how this is a narrative that is used by the rich to continually oppress the poor, and my rebuttals will be integrated. So first of all, talking about why strength as something superficial and it's not important in this debate, in a person's calculus at the end of the day. Now, what you need to realize is that, okay, opening opposition tells you that the output of you doing hardship is not success but strength. But I'm going to tell you exactly why that false sense of strength is exactly the source of unhappiness for these people at the end of the day. Because what you need to notice is that the world is not just. There's always going to be people better than you. There's always going to be people that are more privileged than you and can do things that you can never dream of in a million years, and they can do that with a snap of their hand. Like, for example, you have to work hard and study really hard and do part-time jobs in order to afford education in UI, for example. But then this other guy can just buy his way in simply because his daddy is rich and whatsoever. But what comes from this narrative is that your sense of strength is going to put you in a mental state of comparing yourself to these people as weaker than you. Now, why is this bad? Because then what you're going to do is when you compare yourself to these people, all you're going to feel is disappointment. Let me give you an example. You do a part-time job for 8 hours a day, then you study for 8 hours every day, but you still get lower grades than the privileged people who only sit around in a cafe and study for 3 hours a day, right? This disappointment is going to come to you because then you're comparing yourself to someone who you perceive as weaker than you. And that disappointment is going to only set in more because you've already told yourself that whatever happens, because I work harder, I'm already better than them at the end of the day. This disappointment of comparing yourself, expecting yourself to be stronger than them is exactly what we don't want on this side of the house. Because then Oo's point about talking about, oh, at least I'm better than my previous self and whatnot, it's only superficial, right? What's most likely going to happen is that you're going to be even angrier at yourself for not being able to achieve something that someone doesn't work as hard as you to achieve at the end of the day. You're going to be angry at yourself and angry at that person, and the jealousy is only going to start to build, and your unhappiness is going to build instead of happiness. What's the comparison on our side of the house? This unfairness of the world will still be apparent, but you won't have the delusion that you can achieve anything and everything just by doing hard. So the expectations and the calculus of these people to be happy is going to be even more realistic. The output of this is that people will be more content with what they already have, because the things that they can't change will be accepted, and it's going to lead for them to be having overall happiness and contentment with what they currently have. So talking about my second point, which is the narrative used by how this is a narrative used by the rich to oppress the poor. Pushing this narrative, this will push a narrative that you're only poor because you're lazy. And society can continually use this narrative to blame your hardships on yourself. For example, if you're a father and you're an immigrant, you're going to be blamed because you're not working enough jobs to provide for your child, pushing you to do extreme things, such as, for example, you're going to work 3 jobs as a janitor, as a fry cook, and as a waiter, for example, in order to provide for your child. Why is this bad? Because number one, of course, you need help from your community. Instead, whenever you have this kind of hardship, you're only told to man up and do more at the end of the day. Second of all, the reason for these hardships is not entirely their fault. The reason why this person is probably underprivileged, for example, is because number one, there are bad wages for their jobs, and there's not going to be any changes in minimum wage. And number two, there's bad welfare programs for these kind of workers, ending in them only worsening their condition, even though they're working tirelessly from the bone. In comparison, the rich people and the elites that actually push this narrative don't do anything at all. Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and CEOs and managers can just sit around and only work like 4 hours a day, maybe 2 hours a day, and get the benefits that these people cannot ever dream of. But this likelihood of these things changing can only happen when you're not consistently blamed for the things that aren't your fault. So what's going to change on our side of the house exactly? People are going to actually self-analyze themselves. Is the problem really because I'm not working harder, or is the system like systematically oppressing me in order to not achieve the things that I can, when other people can get those things far easier than I can? This kind of like upward social comparison is exactly the prerequisite for you to call out the people that are oppressing you in society at the end of the day. And if you don't have this narrative, then those exact same people cannot use this narrative to weaponize it against you, telling you that everything is your fault and you can solve all your problems simply by working hard. Because at the end of the day, if these people actually do take like 3 or 4 jobs, the one that's going to be benefited is the rich people who they work for, by giving them cheap labor because they don't have a choice, while these people are still struggling even though they're doing everything they can simply to survive. By those points, we're very proud to propose.
We thank the speaker for that speech. Next, we call upon member of opposition.
Check, am I audible?
Yes.
Hardship not only talking about how you suffer or reading New York Times every day to win the debate, for example, but hardship might exist if you broke, for example, if you fail in tests or if you fail in job application. It's already really mentally exhausting. That is why we need this narrative as people to become stronger in the future. This is the rewards that we have if you already fulfill your hardship, regardless the result of good or bad. What kind of strong people definition in CO1? If you already good in facing upcoming problem and become smarter in facing the future problem. B, if you have strong defense toward your failure, for example. Third, if you have a good emotional control. We all need this as a capital as a capital to do trial and error and do innovation in the future. But before that, we need to kick the opening debate because opening debates most likely talking about he says, she says without explaining what actual benefit are not only in the individual level but also in the communal benefit on that. But before that, I have several responses towards closing government. I think closing government say that they want to break the deadlock, but they only play in best case scenario, which is comfort. Why then this is so harmful? Because firstly, they say that there will be disappointment. Number one, I don't think it is true because because the one who make the people more disappointed is on government when there is no strength on your mentality, for example. But even if we have disappointment, it is good because it's only temporarily. We can utilize this kind of disappointment to feel yourself to learning from the past mistake because the narrative push people to not only doing sacrifice on the wealth and successes but also to the mentally strong. But second of all, they talking about the poor people will be blamed because they don't have good work enough, for example. I don't think this is true because government I think still want to change the to pursue betterment on the to help poor people. Why is that so? Because I think CG play in a very extreme scenario where the government is bad, but we need to play in the moderate scenario when the government is moderate. They want to also help people with this kind of issue. So it is not going to be it's not going to be very harmful. Therefore, three extension in my speech. Number one, let's talk about the self fulfillment, which is better. Second of all, let's talk about how we shape independency to this as a preparation to the future life. Third of all, let's talk about the communal benefit of this narrative. Number one, let's talk about the failure. Why we are better or copying failure? Because the possibility of failure is everywhere. The question then become how you have better coping mechanism on that. Number one, we have the narrative that it's okay to fail in one competition. For example, you can try again and try again. In government, you tend to give up your failure if you fail one day, for example. Why? Because they don't think that this hardship is useless and unworthy to take. That's why give up is really harmful. Three reasons. Number one, with the narrative that you can be more immune towards this kind of future failure. That's why we have better advocacy to mental health issue as a way for you can do this if you believe that this narrative is true. Second of all, I think if we play in the government scenario, at least we have put closure to people who after you give your hardship, for example, regardless of the result, it is good or bad, it's already have self-fulfillment. But lastly, I think the function of being stronger person is make you more personality, which is more mature. Why this is so important? It's valuable because at least you feel content to what you already grown and have a lot of experience. Why people will going to be better? Because you're going to feel happy because you know that this kind of effort already have reward because of you going to have a better person or stronger person in the future. So more happiness and rest of the house. Second of all, let's talk about how do we shape independency and it is as a preparation to the future. No, thank you. Why then self-reliance and independency is more important to become independent in the future? One, we live in a capitalistic globalized era who we need a more moderation of system. For example, sooner or later you are going to be facing a lot of problem in the world, for example. Second, because we protect millennial and youth who facing big expectation from their parents on world full of externalities because we need strength to facing those world. Third of all, I think friends and family is also only temporary for you. Therefore, you need to be independent. What kind of output of this independency? Number one, you can learn on your mistake if you have this kind of narrative. You only have willingness to learn from mistake if you brave enough to take trial and error. Second of all, you can explore more experience. For example, trying to entering more university, for example, or trying to find new job which is much more preferable, for example, trying to challenge yourself in itself. Why I think this is good? Because comparatively, if you settle for us in government side, it is harmful if you live in capitalistic structure. You need to be independent as an adult, for example. Why? Because you need to apply more workforce, for example. You need to move to another places. Therefore, you need this kind of bravery to try that result. What second layer is also prepare the adulthood better, because now youth can explore that. We can say that there is no concept of privilege under Satoshi, because in current content, privilege doesn't have any big contribution. Because if you want to be smart, you can study more. We have internet, which can explore more. We saw that privilege centric is not going to be happen in this kind of globalized era. But what is the benefit of trial and error? If you settle for less, this is harmful, because you only less bravery. They only try the society that is safe and also less impact. For example, you lose in this capitalistic market. Did you lose this competition of work life and so on and so forth? But then OG say they have incentive to from themselves. I don't think this is true, because people try to find as an ordinary people or settle for less because there is no pressure from another people, for example, because that is the nature of human as a playing safe as a people, for example. That's why this is the only way for you to survive in capitalistic system. Last contribution, let's talk about the communal benefit on this. More innovation occur because people don't afraid to think that out of the box. They don't afraid that the society trying new research is really beneficial, for example, or starting new startup, for example, because they want to win this competition in this capitalistic world. What is the communal benefit of it? One, people have willingness to create startup in which becoming booming in the current era, for example. What is the benefit? One, more economic activity to local people. You can improve local economic activity and also more job vacancy access. But second of all, I think more research also solving the world problem, because world is now become problematic because we have environmental problem. More research to mitigate the harm. In opposition, you have less researchers because now there is no willingness to up into that. At least we have more clean energy, more green touch on this kind of issue. But second of all, I think we also solving another problem. For example, we creating new vaccine, or we have surgeries for people with disabilities, or improvement in medical work. This can only exist if you have this narrative first. But lastly, in the solving of inequality, I think economic expert or another expert in government will be hesitant to do more research because they don't think this is lucrative anyway. Therefore, there's less research and less contribution to society. We already proved to you that this kind of benefit is real, and this kind of benefit is not only individual but also communal. We oppose.
Test. Am I audible?
You are audible.
Okay, this speech is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legend. I'm going to begin in 1, 2, 3. Listen, a few things in my speech. First of all, why should we kick first the opening first? Then I'm going to rebut the cases of both OO and CO, whatever. Yeah, forget about the opposition. Let's talk about first. Listen, why you shouldn't really buy the characterization of the opening. The opening put it in the extreme, as my member has stated. Some people are going to work themselves to that. Okay, that is true, but that is not all people. And this is the case that CGs goes all around this. Why this is harmful. But also, the CO mentioned that people are not that stupid, that too extreme. But they also mentioned about how somehow, if this narrative is gone, people will just stop trying and play games. You know? This is simply not true. Because, for example, I am bad at debate, but I'm still here because I enjoy it. This enjoyment is something that most people actually look for. And secondly, if they are that lazy, they don't really they are going to skip ahead and just play games regardless with this narrative or not. This is just a few words. It will really convince people that are that lazy, Lucian. So both cases are extreme and only plays on the fringe, and therefore we couldn't really take them, Lucian. Now let's engage the closing, Lucian. So I would like to ask you this question: what is the definition of insanity? The definition of insanity is when you when you try something and fail, and then you try again, and it will keep failing, but because you're insane, you're going to keep trying that. This is what will happen on their side of the house. They mentioned on our side of the house, we will stop trying. This is simply not true. If you really want something, you are going to try again. But the difference is at our side of the house, we emphasize on smartness, not on trying and somewhat it will get you stronger and makes you succeed. At our side of the house, we will try again when we realize what is wrong with our first attempt. Because again, at the end of the day, with or without this narrative, people will still try again. But what we encourage is for you to be smarter. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, they mentioned about disappointment. But okay, first of all, we are going to dismiss that out of hand because according to their own characterization, people will still feel this feeling, this disappointment, regardless of you strong or not. But they are. But at the end of the day, they will be stronger to be able to take this decision. That is their definition. So at the end of the day, both sides will still face the equal disappointment. Now, lastly, let's talk about the last case. This case is also brought a bit by the opening opposition. They talk about innovativeness, and by extension, when you already do something, you will lose investment if you just give up. I would like to give you a data. Only 6% of a startup company succeed. And by succeed, I mean makes a tiny bit amount of profit. People actually marry their first love. What? Okay, never mind. You're not audible, sorry. Only 1,000 people important. This is because at the end of the day, that means your attempt is very more likely to fail regardless of not. Why is this harmful? This means that, for example, if you research the cure for COVID based on, say, I don't know, bygone, it is not going to work regardless of how many times you try this. This stupid investment is the one that we are going to oppose because again, the dominant insanity is trying something again and again, even if it's going to fail. So if your investment is going to fail, I think smart people can look at their investment because we are playing the moderate case. Most people can look at their company and say, this is maybe the wrong thing. Maybe I can fix this. And there are cases where they just, okay, this is already beyond my hand. This, in their side of the house, people who don't know really what to fix will still keep going because it makes them harder. It makes them stronger. Lastly, I'm going to engage on the point, let's say on the point of stronger on general, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, does being stronger actually makes you happy, ladies and gentlemen? They mentioned it makes you more mature. It makes you more mature and makes you happier, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, what is maturity? Can I eat that? No, ladies and gentlemen. Maturity does not really matter. People are going, when people think they work hard, so therefore they are, according to the narrative, if you work hard, then means you are you are stronger than normal people. But you still see the normal people achieve things that you couldn't. This will lead to feelings of jealousy, of anger, of why I couldn't really do that. I tried so hard and got so far, but in the end it doesn't even matter. This will cause jealousy and anger. This at the end of the day will make you not happy because you will realize at the end of the day you lose even if you are stronger. Lastly, gentlemen, I would like to engage on the point of privilege, gentlemen. The point of privilege they say about, okay, people can still study hard and to be smart. Okay, I don't get this argument. First of all, to get to university, you need to have at least a bit of money. At least you are a middle class. Universities are expensive. Or two, if you want to get scholarship, you need to be really, really smart. Again, being smart is a privilege. Not all people are smart. Most people, especially say in Indonesia, are both dumb and poor. The average IQ is only like 80. That is clearly not enough for you to get to university. So this is why, at the end of the day, why our side wins. We are the only one who helps these people. A bit of clarification. What my member means when the narrative is people means that the narrative, which is why this is the most important part. It's because most people who buy this argument, this narrative is actually the people who succeed at life, the other end of the spectrum, which we are the only one who engage. When you are rich and successful, you will look at yourself and say, hey, I made this themselves. I become rich because of my hard work. And those people who does not become rich, those people who does not become good at math, only have themselves to blame. these people, the successful one, the one that experience more success than failure, they will hardship, and they will oppose the socialist policy. This is not the extreme case, gentlemen. This is the narrative that exists in the United States right now about why people oppose the socialist policy. This is because, hey, I work myself from the ground up. Somehow I become really rich. But this is not the case, ladies and gentlemen, because at the end of the day, most people, as I mentioned, don't even get a advantages that most people are not. And we are the only one. That's why, and this is something without this narrative, these people wouldn't really have this and will look at poor people and just look, oh, they are not as privileged as me. And this is why we are proud to propose, because we are the only one who brings you a social benefit, and we engage on both the extreme and not extreme case. Thank you.
Opposition web.
Okay. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. A few framings before going to my rebuttals. I think that first we need to kick OG because they play to extreme craze as if people don't have any rationale to just opt out from those toxic environment. I think that if you I think that these people, when they still care about survivability, they will opt out anyway, because survivability is much more important than what people tell you, than what your society tries to dictate you. I think that these people still have that kind of calculus. Second of all, I think that we also need to kick OO because they're also evil, claiming that people are going to settle for less, and I think that their benefit is also just very personal and uncertain, because like I think that we're going to provide you more grounded benefit, which is independence, because we cannot rely on people, because friends is temporary, and we're going to protect youth because they're the one that's very vulnerable, because first they get biggest expectations, second of all they face most complex phase of life and also changes, and we're the only team that can take that kind of worst case scenario. What if people get burned out? It's perfectly fine because the circumstances is what pushes them to do so. Fourth of all, I think that we provide wider benefit and how this narrative actually drives people who can give biggest changes, which are researchers or people that create startup companies, people like these researchers that try to tap into like technology market, for example. Like people in the past says that, oh, this is too challenging, you cannot win, and there's already Microsoft and so on and so forth. But people will still succeed anyway, right? Like people create tap into diversified market, for example. I think that what drives them to do so is exactly this kind of narrative, because this narrative is what pushes them to keep on trying regardless of failure, because in the end of the day they know that there will be compensated. I think that because people are very pragmatic, this is the best motivation to give this is the best motivation for them. Lastly, I think that CG never explained without necessarily explaining why their side is going to be better off. No, thank you. So a couple of independent rebuttal. First, it is directed to OG. They try to claim that in their certain house, people will self-actualize to things that they're naturally good at or things that they're already talented. I think this is a very unrealistic, because you can see your field of expertise after you try multiple subjects at once. You will not know you're good at math if you don't compare your grades with history. That's the analogy, right? In government, you're likely to fall into parents' expectation and also parents' suggestion of selected majors, because parents can say just go to local universities and grab business major or law majors. Don't have to study hard for Ivy League. Don't be an athlete because it's competitive. This creates two things. Firstly, this creates more saturated market because people opt into majors that are already saturated and also already having like lots of demands in the States. Second of all, this also limits children's exploration, especially when parents can dictate them what majors they should enter and what majors they should not enter. Lastly, I think let's rebut CG's claim about world of comparison and this creates disappointment to people. I think that this narrative doesn't come in vacuum, ladies and gentlemen. There's also narrative that experiences and hardship are different from each individuals. There's also subjective, like don't judge people based on their covers. Just because they look happy doesn't mean like behind that they don't suffer. I think that this narrative also what go into hand in hand and accompanies this particular narrative of hardship make you stronger. That's why I think that this kind of disappointment will not exist. People will still feel content about themselves. Now going to my issue. I only have one issue. Which world is better? But before that, yes, opening if you have anything.
Thank you. If everyone except your member concedes that privilege exists, and I already explained that this narrative makes people assume it doesn't, and society is fair instead, can you please engage why your narrative makes society better?
Well, I think I'm going to tell that in the later in my issue. But okay, firstly, why this world is better in our set of house? 3 reasons. Firstly, I think that we're going to push individuals to be much more self-reliant, to be much more versatile, powerful, and also smart enough to the upcoming challenge. Because the translation of this narrative is that you need to get up in every hardship. You need to be brave enough to try, because we never know what what God wants to what kind of person you can become in the future. Like there will be personal growth and everything. I think in government side, you're going to expect other people to help. This is harmful because help is very uncertain. When people are getting very individual and also like world is highly competitive, but then they say, oh, that this narrative is it's a narrative to change the structure and criticize the elite. I think that this benefit is very uncertain, especially if elites is that strong in the political inside of the political system. They have political lobbying. Second of all, they're also in our economic system. They dominate the corporate zones. So far, third of all, the bargain between like labor union and also the communists are also always reaching deadlock. Like the bargain is hard to find middle ground to begin with. Fourth of all, the structure is already pre-existing for hundreds of years. So that's why I think that it's very unlikely that you can suddenly flip the world and change the system just because you change this narrative. And the only way we can do is that to strengthen the middle class and also the youth that facing up these challenges, to strengthen those people and also give those people who are the most oppressed by the system. Because changing the system is never certain. It takes lots of effort and also it's very gradual. And I think that it doesn't also come exclusively from this particular narrative.
Fine.
But second of all, what we prove you is that no thank you, is that we have more innovations. Because the prerequisite for new findings and also breakthrough researches is that people willing to try first and also face the challenging process. At least that these researchers or people who opt into this are thinking that, okay, let's just try to take the risk. I think that at worst, I don't find anything. At least I will have personal growth, things like that. Because people are pragmatic, we need to give them a reward first. But from this reward, we provide wider benefit than OO. I think we give hope to people with cancer because there's always researchers trying to find them medicines. We give hope to COVID-19 patients because we say that there's also researchers dedicated to find your cure, for example. I think that, and lastly, talking about failing startup, I think that this can happen in their side too because market is very volatile. What is exclusive on our side of the house is we gave them hope to bounce back, to take loans, and also restructurize. I think this is the most important thing. But lastly, what if this is the thing that makes people not settling for less. We're going to take the worst bullet. What if at worst we push people for burnout? We think that's perfectly fine because trial and error in process of trying is the experiment that helps you, firstly, to evaluate your mistakes. Second of all, know your best strategy. Because in our side, those who are academically unprivileged will be pushed to go schools to ways like athletics, for example. Okay, it's fine if you don't excel at math. You can try to other things and evaluate your mistakes, right? I think that this is the prerequisite for people to climb up social ladder. We're very proud to oppose.
Thank you very much. As this is a silent round, you may immediately exit the breakout room and then wait for the breaking announcement later tonight. Thank you very much.
Host, kenapa direkam ininya? Main hall-nya?